You're listening to the Assembly Call IU podcast and postgame show, the place where Indiana fans across the globe hang out online after every IU basketball game. Join us for our live broadcasts on Thursday nights and immediately following every IU game at our website, assemblycall.com. That's assemblycall.com.
Hey, real quick before we get to this week's edition of Banner Monday, a few quick words from our sponsor, SeatGeek. Getting tickets online can be complicated, too complicated. With hundreds of sites and varying levels of reliability, it is hard to know who to trust. And that's why SeatGeek is the way to go. SeatGeek pulls millions of tickets into one place so you can easily find the seats that you want for a price you're willing to pay. There's nothing quite like being there in person, and SeatGeek will get you closer to the action for a great value. Lots of really interesting games coming up on the IU schedule that you may want to get tickets for, and SeatGeek is the place where you will find the best value, because what SeatGeek does is they search multiple ticket sites, they grade every ticket based on value, and that helps you immediately identify the best seats that fit your budget, and every purchase is fully guaranteed, so you can shop for tickets on SeatGeek with confidence. I have the SeatGeek app on my phone. It's what I use when I'm getting tickets to a sporting event, getting concert tickets, anything, because they just make the ticket buying experience more pleasant than anybody else, and it helps you save money. A couple of good things, obviously. And best of all, listeners of the Assembly Call get $10 off of your first SeatGeek purchase. Just download the SeatGeek app, enter the promo code ASSEMBLY today. That's promo code ASSEMBLY for $10 off your first SeatGeek purchase. SeatGeek, life's an event. We have the tickets. Obviously, my voice is not what it normally is, dealing with a little bit of a cold, as you'll hear on this episode. But bear with me. Mike DeCourcy is here. Ryan Phillips is here. They're able to do a lot of the heavy lifting, and I'm going to go drink some tea, rest up, and not talk between now and tomorrow night so that I am well-rested and my voice recovers before the Duke postgame show. All right, here is this week's edition of Banner Monday. And welcome, Hoosier fans, to this week's edition of Banner Monday, where we kick off each week by doing what IU fans love more than anything else, talking hoops. IU hoops, Big Ten hoops, deep dives into basketball strategy and concepts, plus previews of IU's upcoming opponents. We do it all here every Monday, and we are happy to have you here with us. This is the 6th edition of Banner Monday, and it is our 446th episode overall of the Assembly Call, recorded on the afternoon of Monday, November 26, 2018.
It sounds like Jerod has done 446 episodes this weekend.
I am fighting a bit of a cold, so I apologize in advance for my voice, but I'm a gamer. We're going to fight through this. Okay, so let's begin this edition of the Assembly Call how we begin every edition of the Assembly Call, and that is with our Hoosier Proud Banner Moment. And this week, there are 3 micro moments that I'm going to kind of merge into one larger macro banner moment. The first occurred in the second half of the Arkansas game. You will recall that Indiana was down by double digits and appeared on the verge of losing without much of a whimper, really. Then Juwan Morgan, who had missed much of the first half with foul trouble, asserted himself and led Indiana's charge to coming within literally inches of stealing an ugly road win. The second occurred in the second half of the UT Arlington game when Juwan put his injury-riddled Hoosiers on his back again, turning an uncomfortably close 1-point game into a 14-point victory with a late second-half surge. And the third occurred in the UC Davis game when once again many Hoosiers struggled to play consistently well, but not Juwan. Once he asserted himself about midway through the first half, he became the game's dominant presence and once again helped Indiana avoid a disastrous result despite subpar overall play. This past week was a great reminder of the single most important truth about this year's Indiana basketball team. While Romeo Langford is this team's most impressive talent and Rob Finney is its biggest surprise and steadiest backcourt hand, Juwan Morgan is by far this team's most valuable and important player. Indiana is clearly going to need more consistent contributions across the roster to contend in a deep and rugged Big Ten, but not many teams have a senior so able and willing to put his team on his back like Indiana has in Juwan Morgan. He's off to a heck of a start, and he's the biggest reason to continue believing this IU team can achieve great things this season. All righty, and now, to my right, you already heard his voice. That was his actual voice. That was not a drop. He is back from Maui. Ladies and gentlemen, Ryan Phillips. I don't even have any jokes. I'm just so happy you're back. We've missed you. It's great to have you here, man.
You just need somebody else to talk on this episode.
Yeah, I need someone to bail me out if my voice completely goes away.
Yeah.
So your opening thoughts, rants, positive thoughts, whatever you got for us.
First, I want to say congratulations to the Indiana men's soccer team, by the way, who advanced to the quarterfinals of the NCAA tournament yesterday with a dominating 2-0 win. Quest for 9 is still alive. These guys can do it. It's one of the best teams in the history of IU soccer. So I have to mention that off the top. I know it's a basketball show, but we do all things. We address all things Indiana here sometimes. So
yeah, we do.
And then I haven't been on since the Arkansas loss, since UC Davis, Texas Arlington, all that. I thought the Arkansas loss was unfortunate, especially with the way things went down at the end. I was talking to some people out in Maui, and specifically Jay Billis. Again, just dropping that name for you. I was sitting talking to Jay Billis, and he said, that Arkansas loss isn't a bad loss for Indiana. They should have won, and it wasn't a bad loss. It won't hurt them long term, and it could be the kind of loss that makes them better. Obviously, they're struggling with health and getting everybody back. I think that was a big part of what happened against UT Arlington and UC Davis, not just burying those teams. These guys look tired. I mean, from the video I saw, and I did watch the entire UT Arlington game, they look tired and they look worn out and worn down. And it just, these guys need a break, and they need some other guys to get healthy. And you can't have Juwan Morgan play 40 minutes a game and win the Big Ten. So I think that's really the next step, is getting everybody healthy. Everything else, I mean, look, they struggled over the holidays. It's fine. That happens. It's not great. We're not excited about it like we were the Marquette win. But the Marquette win was the last time they were really healthy. And they played really well. And after that, nothing. And so you really need to get this team healthy, get the guys who are core players like Devontae Green and Zach McRoberts back. Get a guy who you expected to play a lot, like Race Thompson, back. I mean, Demezy Anderson's playing way more time than anybody expected. So I would say once they get healthy, the season should look a little different.
Yep. All right, so on tap for this week, we will do our usual mailbag coming up. Then Mike DeCourcy will be here for the Big Ten Roundup. No Basketball 201 this week, but Ben will be back next week. So Ryan is going to come back, and we will do an in-depth IU Duke preview. Ryan, did you see them play all 3 games out in Maui?
I did, yeah. And,
okay.
They're impressive.
Yeah.
I'll say that. They're impressive.
So we will talk about that, what Indiana needs to do to win. All of that coming this week here on Banner Monday. Before we hop into the mailbag, I do want to remind you real quick about the best way to shop online for great deals on IU basketball and football tickets. Just remember the URL, iutickets.shop. It will take you right to SeatGeek, where you can immediately find the best deals on IU basketball tickets, other sports tickets, concert tickets, and more.
Get a brother, get some coupons.
And as a bonus, you can use the promo code ASSEMBLY to get $10 off your first purchase. And by the way, when you use that URL, iutickets.shop, we actually get paid a commission for referring you, so it is a great way to support the show as well. Again, the URL is iutickets.shop.
Thank you.
All right, Ryan, let's jump into this mailbag here. We got, and I put out a call for questions inside of our IU basketball community. So we got a lot of them. Leland asked us who guards Zion. Maybe we'll save that one for the preview coming up, because that's obviously.
I mean, we can talk about it now. Why not? I mean, people are going to be wondering about that game. It's tomorrow. I mean, there's plenty to talk about in the preview, Jared. I think we should really dive in on Duke.
So who guards Zion?
Nobody. Like it's. I remember. Billis was on the air talking about Zion, and somebody asked him, he's like, give me 3 words to describe him. And the 3 words were, oh my God. Like he's really unguardable in college. I really think he is. I think Indiana might be best served to go zone and pray that they can rebound. I don't know. I think you're probably going to have to put Juwan Morgan on him, but maybe you have to start Deron Davis then, because you got to put somebody on Marcus Bolden, who's a 7-footer who, was the MVP of one of their games in Maui. They're just so, it's such a puzzle how you stop one, how you stop the other. And luckily for Gonzaga out in Maui, Gonzaga had some size and had some really good veteran guards who were able to help stop what Duke was doing. But it was touch and go. Duke played his worst game of the tournament and still almost won. So I really don't know what they're going to do. You're playing at Cameron, so you've got to expect you're going to get in foul trouble. And then after Juwan Morgan, who guards him? There's just, I don't know. I don't know where it goes. But I think you probably, if you're really trying to win this game, I think Juwan Morgan on Zion has to be the first place you go, because I don't see who else can guard him.
Yeah, and we saw what happens to Indiana if Juwan Morgan gets in early foul trouble in that Arkansas game when he had to sit. I mean, so that's dangerous. That's really dangerous. But also, Juwan is your All-American candidate. You got to put your best guy on their best guy, and I guess take your chances. Yeah,
I mean, who else could he guard? They're all good, and they all could get him into foul trouble. It really is kind of it's a Rubik's Cube. It is. I mean, you do one thing and it screws up something else. So for Indiana, especially, hoping they're healthy and hoping guys, if you have your full complement of players, maybe it's an easier problem, but we don't know who's going to play. So, we'll see. But yeah, I think that if I'm the coach and I'm really going out there trying to win this game and not trying, stay close and make it look good, and I'm going all in and trying to win this game, I think you have to start what you want on Zion Williamson.
Well, there's a little preview of the IU Duke preview, so we'll get to more of that coming up here a little bit later. So this question comes from Scott. In terms of the injured players, if you could have had one the entire time, and he's not saying Romeo, who was only injured for a few minutes after hurting his nose in that one game, but Devontae, Ray, Zach McRoberts, the guys who have been hurt, if you could have had one the whole time, who would that player be and why? Who would it have been?
Zach McRoberts. Just because of his defense, and he's a steadying influence. He also allows a guy like Romeo maybe to slide to the wing more, slide more down, where he can be a wing and a driver as opposed to hanging out on the perimeter as much as more of a shooting guard. I think that Zach can also do a bunch of things. He can step inside and guard somebody. You can switch him 1 through 5. He takes charges. He's a guy who defensively particularly mucks up the game for the opposition, and the IU I think's needed that the last couple games, and he can change momentum by taking a charge, by getting a steal and a breakaway, and we've seen him shoot it better this year. So I just think that he's a steadying influence. I think that's what's been missing, as opposed to a guy like Devontae, who is a high ceiling scorer, an aggressive defender, all that. But I feel like they've needed a steadying influence more than a high ceiling influence these last couple games.
Yeah, I mean, the argument for Devontae would be we are so thin with ball handlers, and we really saw that in the UT Arlington game, where by the end of the game, Rob Finney was literally the only ball handler available after Al and Romeo went out. Right. So, in truth, both of those guys serve really, really important functions on this team, and you need both of them.
Al Durham bringing the ball up against Arkansas was something they never predicted at the beginning of the year, against pressure, having him bring the ball up. I mean, that's putting him in a situation he wasn't supposed to be in.
And it sounds like both of those guys could play on Tuesday. Apparently, according to Archie Miller earlier today, they did non-contact work yesterday. Whether they play or not on Tuesday at Duke is going to be based on how they practice today, because I guess they're going to get a full practice in. We'll see how they do, how they respond to contact. So, look, fingers crossed. I mean, Indiana's going to need both of those guys, because Zach McRoberts is a huge defensive weapon that you can put on someone like Cameron Reddish, and make life difficult on him, or even just to harass R.J. Barrett as he constantly drives to the basket over and over again. So we'll have to wait and see on those two guys. But it does sound like Indiana is getting healthier, and that's obviously very, very good news. This question comes in from Mark Ryan. He says, are we worried about the wrong stats? Archie's teams at Dayton were poor free throw shooting teams and also turned the ball over at a fairly high rate. Is it possible that Archie's teams do not perform well in these areas because he does not prioritize them over other areas he feels are more important to winning? So let me just give you a couple quick numbers here. In terms of free throw percentage, Archie's first year at Dayton, they shot 77.7%. That was second in the country. His second season at Dayton, they shot 71.7%. That was 103rd. Every year after that at Dayton, they were under 70%, 68.1, 68.6, 66.8, 69.3. That was 200 or below every season. You don't need me to tell you the numbers since he's been at Indiana. It does seem like there may be a little bit of validity there, as opposed in terms of turnovers. 2 of his last 3 teams at Dayton were actually in the top 100 in turnover rate, and 3 of his last 4 were in the top half of the country in terms of turnover rate. And last year, he took a team that had been terrible in turnover rate, and they were in the top half of the country. So I see what Mark is saying for free throw percentage, because that the numbers certainly bear that out. I don't think the numbers necessarily bear it out for turnover percentage, because some of his, like the worst turnover percentage that he had was his second year at Dayton, so he's still kind of working with some of the players who had been left over. And obviously this year, it hasn't been good so far, but we'll have to see, what it finishes out at. So
they're also missing a primary ball.
Yeah, right. Right. So how concerned are you about those two areas?
The turnover's not. I'm not. I think that he prioritizes that. I think that he's just, guys are put in an awkward situation where right now his primary ball handler is a true freshman. And that's tough to work with at times. And he's got a lot of young guys on the floor. Romeo, no matter how good he is still a freshman. He's going to turn the ball over. Devontae Green is not, when he comes back, is not known for protecting the ball extremely well, but he's a veteran and knows what to expect from defenders. So I think that also, you had one game where Justin Smith turned it over like 7 times or something, and you're not going to see that often. So I'm not really concerned about the turnover. The free throw shooting I am concerned about, and it is something that I don't know if Archie needs to hire somebody. I don't know, what would you call that? A shot
physician.
Engineer, physician, something along those lines, to help these guys at the free throw line. We happen to know somebody who's available. And
Fred, call me.
Yeah. So maybe he needs to make a call. But for real, I think they do need to work on it. And a lot of times free throws are the players you bring in, whether they're good free throw shooters or not. But again, it is something you can tweak, modify, and work with. And it's something that Indiana definitely has to tweak, modify, and work with, because the free throws they've missed have been very costly.
The irony of that, how bad Archie's teams have been at shooting free throws, is that they consistently have high free throw rates. So they consistently get to the line. Like, you look at his last 3 teams at Dayton, 4th in the country, 75th in the country, 10th in the country in free throw rate, getting to the line. Last year, Indiana was good, 89th in the country. This year, they're in the top 100. So his teams are getting to the line, and like cumulatively, they're hitting a high quantity of free throws, but the percentage just isn't there, and they're leaving points on the floor and not being as efficient offensively as they could be. So it seems like, with the way that he wants to play, something that you would prioritize. So we'll have to see.
Worth noting that Archie Miller shot 84.6% from the free throw line as a player. So he knows how to make free throws. He's got to teach his team to do it.
Yeah. So, it'd be interesting to see if that, comes more from adjustments and how they practice, hiring a shot doctor, recruiting guys who are better free throw shooters. We'll just have to see. But I agree with you. That's starting to concern me a little bit, especially given the way that Archie wants to play. JD says, Ryan, what is the most interesting thing you learned about any of the Maui teams while you were out there?
I learned I didn't know that Rui Hachimura did not speak English when he was growing up. He's Gonzaga's star player.
He looked good.
It looked fantastic, and he's Japanese. And I mean I knew that, but I didn't know that he was. I figured he was Japanese American from here or whatever, but he's also a big part of the Japanese national team, and they are trying to qualify for the 2020 Olympics, which will be in Tokyo. So I learned a little bit about him, which was interesting. And just Gonzaga in general, I mean, I knew they were a good team. Missing Killian Tilly, I did not expect them to win that tournament. I expected them to play well, but they're missing their top big man, like the guy that everybody looks at on that team, and everybody else stepped up and played really well. I could definitely see Gonzaga and Duke playing again in the tournament, maybe in the Final Four. That was a really fun game. And I mean, I also learned how important Duke's bench pieces are to that team, because they're not particularly deep with, veteran depth. And those bench pieces, and we'll talk about it in the preview, those bench pieces are going to be key to their run this year, because the freshmen play like freshmen at times. They're so good that they can cover that up, but they play like freshmen at times. And those bench guys are going to be really important.
So you sent us that picture where you were around the table with Coach K. Did you get any questions in? Did you have any one-on-one conversations? Did he threaten your media credentials?
Coach K is we'll save some of this for AC After Dark after some night. But Coach K is a master at saying a lot, or like talking a lot and saying absolutely nothing. So I spent probably 20 minutes trying to get something out of him and did not get much. But I have an article coming out, the big lead about that sometime this week, and we'll definitely promote that. The worst human being on the planet. I wouldn't go that far.
Not anymore.
He's certainly in the running, but no.
Okay, so Larry wants to know what's wrong with Race Thompson. Based on what we've heard, Race is having concussion-like symptoms. I don't know if he has a concussion, but having some concussion-like symptoms at the least. So no real timetable there on when he can return. He seems like a guy that would be important in a game like this, where you need some depth to go at Duke. So it's unfortunate that he won't be ready. James says, best guess at who's going to be available. So again, Zach and Devontae will be game time decisions. Based on Archie's comments today, it sounds like De'Ron is still just kind of dealing with some pain, dealing with some soreness. I think he'll play, but I don't know that we'll see, 23 minutes from De'Ron like we saw whatever game that was recently, maybe UT Arlington. No, Arkansas, where he played 23 minutes.
Yeah, it was Arkansas.
And you'll notice, he hasn't really been the same since that game. He played really well, but that game seemed to kind of take a little bit out of him, and he's kind of been dealing with some soreness, there. So those are the three guys that seem like question marks. Jerome Hunter obviously out. Race Thompson will be out, and we'll just have to wait and see on those other guys. But Romeo, Al, other guys who have been dealing with injuries, they are also expected to be playing and essentially be fine. And then we got this question, Ryan, predictions on overall results of the ACC Big Ten Challenge. How do you – I've got it game by game here. If you want to see it, I can send it to you.
Go ahead.
But if not –
just read it off. Okay.
Let's
do a couple of the big games because the minor ones nobody cares about.
So just to give folks a quick recap, overall the ACC is leading 12-5-2. They won the first 10 ACC Big Ten challenges. The next 7 were the Big Ten winning or a tie, and the ACC has won the last 2. The ACC dominated last year at 11-3. So Monday night's games, you've got Nebraska at Clemson, Minnesota at Boston College. Do you have opinions on either of those?
No, not really. I mean, those are toss-ups for me, I think.
Yeah, same for me. I just kind of sided with the home teams. If it's a toss-up in college basketball, I tend to go with the home team. Tuesday night, we've got Penn State hosting Virginia Tech, Illinois at Notre Dame, Michigan State at Louisville, Wisconsin hosting NC State, Iowa hosting Pitt. Iowa is ranked like 13th or 14th right now. Who expected that? And then, of course, Indiana at Duke. Any in there that you want to take a stab at?
Well, I think Michigan State's going to win. What were the other? Wait, who was Iowa playing?
Iowa is playing at home against Pitt. They should win that one.
Okay, Iowa's going to win that.
Wisconsin should beat NC State, too, especially at home.
Definitely be a win. Although Wisconsin, I don't think they've looked very good this year. But still, at home, they'll win that. Let's face it. We know the Cold Center.
We do.
North Carolina playing?
North Carolina plays Wednesday at Michigan.
I think Michigan's going to win that.
I agree.
Then North Carolina is going to be really good by the end of the year, but they're not there yet.
Well, it happens, and that's something for Indiana fans to keep in mind.
And I think Michigan is playing very well right now. So those are the big ones, I think.
I guess when I look at it, home teams, I think, for the most part, the home teams will win. Penn State hosting Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech is really good. That's a game where Virginia Tech, could and maybe should beat Penn State, even at Penn State. Notre Dame should beat Illinois. You would think, just kind of based on looking at it. The other one is Michigan State's playing at Louisville. I think we both think Michigan State will win that game. And then
Nick Ward's been playing really well, and you need a big man on the road to play well, and I think that he'll get that.
Yeah, Maryland is hosting Virginia. So, being at home, that'll help Maryland, but I think, Virginia is kind of will be the popular pick there. And then Purdue at Florida State. That's kind of a toss-up game. Both those teams are really good.
Yeah, I think so too. We'll see it 50-50. But yeah, look, I feel like the ACC is a little better this year, but I feel like at the top right now, other than Duke, I think that, and maybe Virginia, I feel like at the top, the Big Ten might have the better overall team. The team's performing better right now as far as at the top. But, ACC is always so good, and they always wind up being so good. Even if it looks like a down year, by the end of the year, they get so much talent in that conference that they wind up being good. So it can be a rough one for the Big Ten again.
Well, speaking of that challenge, we'll talk about it here coming up with Mike DeCourcy. You're going to go step away for a minute, and then you'll come back and join us after that?
Will do.
Okay. All righty, coming up on the Assembly Call, it is time for a Big Ten Roundup with Mike DeCourcy from BTN and the Sporting News. He will discuss his impressions of IU's 2 wins from the past week, and we'll look ahead to the Big Ten ACC Challenge. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. Welcome back to Banner Monday. Each week here in our second segment, we zoom out to look at how things are going across the Big Ten Conference, and there's no one better to provide insight on Big Ten basketball than Mike DeCourcy, who covers Big Ten hoops for BTN, in addition to his columns for the Sporting News. Mike, welcome back to Banner Monday.
I'm especially useful today, Jerod, because I talk too much most of the time, and now I can save your precious voice.
Yeah, I'm just going to get out of the way. I'm just going to move. I sent you over the questions earlier that I wanted to discuss, so Mike, take it away. Just kidding. But let's start with this. So let's talk first about Indiana. Your impressions of Indiana's week. The Hoosiers had 2 double-digit victories, both over sub-200 opponents, and both a little bit too close for comfort for IU fans. What did you think of the Hoosiers this week?
I think a couple things need to be taken into that discussion. First of all, I think although UC Davis, I would not put this in that category. UT Arlington has been a pretty good program over the last 5 years. And you're talking about a team that won 21 games a year ago and has been reasonably proficient in their conference, top 4 in the Southland, which has produced some very good basketball teams over over that last period. Stephen F. Austin has had some really good teams in that period. So playing them close, I don't think is a matter of great concern. I think the thing that's a concern is that you had to play those games essentially with 5-man outfits. I mean, Juwan Morgan played 40 minutes in one of those games. I think it was the Davis game. So that's concerning, but given that none of the injuries to date is a long-term deal, we're not going to see him till February, or maybe he's going to redshirt deal.
Except for Jerome Hunter.
Yeah, except for Jerome Hunter, who honestly I did not expect to be a huge factor in the rotation anyway. So from that standpoint, I think you're in good shape. They'll be back. Your rotation will deepen, and you wouldn't expect guys to get worn out a little bit. I think the good news out of all that is Juwan Morgan playing like a star, which is what he needs to be for this team to be special. I still believe that their best version is him as the first option. That doesn't necessarily always mean you're going to be the leading scorer, but if things run through him and then they filter off to the other players, to Romeo, etc., then you have a better team, because he is a very difficult player to defend at his best. Can shoot the basketball from deep. We saw him hit 5 3-pointers in one of the games. He could put the basketball on the floor and get fouled. He's a good passer. So when he's at his best, I think Indiana's at their best. So that's a great sign for them, for him to play well in both those games. Going forward, I think you'll see a better Indiana team. I think the one thing, in addition to the having to play so many minutes, that came out of those 2 games that was concerning was Deron Davis having some tightness in his Achilles, some pain or whatever it is exactly, and only being able to play 6 minutes combined in those 2 games. That's not a good sign, because again, your best version of Indiana is Juwan as the first option, and then Deron, when he comes in, either sometimes maybe together against certain opponents, but when he comes in to replace Juwan, it completely changes who you are, and that's good, because it forces teams to deal with you differently.
So let's look ahead now. Indiana playing Duke. We know that the assumption is that Duke is going to win this game. That's what, I think they're favored, I saw, by 13.5 points. What to you are the 1 or 2 biggest keys for Indiana to make this a competitive 40-minute game?
I think the first thing they have to do is they have to play offense well. I have a friend I wrote about this when Gonzaga made the title game a few years ago. I have kind of a Gonzaga pen pal, so to speak. He emails me, keeps me up to date with what's going on with the Zags. And he asked me before the game, what does Gonzaga have to do to deal with Duke? And I said, the first thing they have to do is they have to make baskets. And the second thing that they have to do is they have to make shots. And those are not, they're not exactly the same. I mean, what I meant by the first was they have to score a lot of points. And they ended up scoring over 90. And the other thing they had to do was they had to make threes, because at that point they were not shooting the basketball well for the most part. And they did in that game as well. And I think those 2 keys as well stand for Indiana. Indiana has maybe not had as much trouble making baskets, at this point, but they're going to be in a difficult environment. They're going to be against a team that's very talented, and that's going to affect how they play. So they certainly have been on the road before. That's a good sign, but they're going to have to be very effective on offense. And then I think the second thing that has to happen is they have to find a matchup for R.J. Barrett. Somebody has to be able to at least figure out a way to keep him out of the lane, because if he's going downhill all night, Juwan's going to be back there and going to be sort of forced to have to contend with being a help defender a lot. And I think that that's really problematic. You know, when people look at Duke, they see Zion Williamson and they start to quake because there's just nobody like him. But the guy who makes them really difficult to deal with is R.J. Barrett. I'm telling you, I have never seen a young wing player who is as good at getting into the lane and in one-on-one situations as R.J. Barrett. I mean, I've seen guys with more varied games, more dynamic games, better shooters, blah, blah, blah. But just this one particular skill, the ability to look a defender in the eye and get him off balance and get into his body and get by him and finish the play, he is extraordinary. And so I don't know who the ideal matchup for that is.
Well, I can tell you who most Indiana fans were thinking as soon as you said that was Zach McRoberts. I mean, now we don't even know if he's going to play yet, but is this a case where as good of a defender as Zach is and as fundamentally sound and as hard as he plays, is R.J. Barrett just too good of an athlete for a guy like Zach to consistently defend, or would he have a shot against him?
No, I think he would. I think that Zach knows how to play defense. He's really a sharp player, knows angles. There may be, like, if you say to yourself, the first thing you have to do against R.J. Barrett is you have to keep him out of the lane. And that's universally true. Even at the expense of maybe giving up a 3 early or 2, you have to keep him out of the lane. So that maybe, Zach would understand not to get right up in his grill necessarily and allow RJ to get him off balance and to use his physicality. He's really crafty, RJ Barrett, at using his body and using his body weight against your body weight so that he gets a physical advantage if you get too close to him. And so and of course at home, he's going to get the advantage as well, for the most part, with the whistle. So you have to be able to measure that. And I think Zach would give them a chance there. And when R.J. Barrett went up against the USA U19 team, which Romeo was a member of, but I think by then he was kind of injured, not playing very much. When he went up against them in the semifinals of the U19 World Championships, John Calipari tried like 7 different guys, and he blew them all up. And when you watch the Kentucky game, it was kind of similar. They tried a lot of different guys, and he blew them all up. So one of the first things you have to do is not let him get going to where he believes that every time he touches the ball, he's gonna lay it in. And so you have to deny him the ball in the places where he wants it, particularly at the top of the key. You have to make sure that when he does get it there, that he doesn't have an obvious angle to the rim. So sometimes maybe you have to cheat off on ball side and just make him aware of that. And so there are a lot of different areas in which you have to contain R.J. Barrett. And you could do all those things and he can still beat you. But if you allow him access to the lane at will, then your chances of winning are almost nil.
All right, so let's talk Big Ten here, and let's start with your power rankings. What is your current top 4, and where does Indiana currently stand in what has become a very competitive pecking order very early here in the season?
Well, I'm going to, since it's my segment, I'm going to cheat, and I'm going to rank 5 and tie the last one for 4th because it's really hard to separate them. And this is a great sign for the conference as they go into league play this weekend. I mean, if they can get through the ACC Big Ten Challenge somewhere near 500 in those games, they're just in fantastic shape because they didn't come out of the multi-team tournaments exactly where they wanted to be, but they came out in very good shape. And you've got multiple teams with high major victories and a lot with high major victories that are away from home. So I started with Michigan, still playing great basketball in that Villanova win, although it's not what it was the day they got it. It's still an important win. Iowa, big time wins in a neutral court environment. You could make a case for other teams, but I'll stick with them as long as they're playing this well. I think Michigan State, even though they're not undefeated, they did lose to one of the best teams in the country in Kansas, and then they went out and beat a couple of the teams that should be among the best in the country out in Vegas and won their tournament over the holiday. And so the fourth place I tied between Ohio State and Minnesota. Minnesota has 3 high major wins, including a couple that are away from home. And Ohio State has 2 high major road wins, and Cincinnati and Creighton. So I could have probably leaned toward one or the other, but since I have the luxury, I figured I'd tie them. I'd say Indiana is in the ballpark of that, but missing the Arkansas win would keep them from making the list. But, I mean, I think they're in great shape, and I think the league is in great shape. And Indiana will be in really great shape when they have 8 or 9 healthy players rather than 5 or 6.
Can't wait for that to happen. What players or teams really caught your eye this week in particular?
I think in particular, Amir Coffey. Minnesota is, for the most part, playing Amir Coffey as their initiator. You want to call him point guard. And I think that sometimes people maybe don't understand the different ways you can use a player to initiate offense. I mean, not every team has to have. I use Chris Paul let's call him Yogi Ferrell though for the purpose of our audience. Yogi initiated by the time he was at the end of his career. The ball was in his hands all the time. The game belonged to him. He was either going to score it or pass it for the most part, and everything derived from him. And that's great if you've got a guy like that. In Minnesota's case, they don't have anybody even remotely like that. So they are using Amir Coffey to initiate offense. And what's been a positive, look, he's not averaging big assist numbers because they're not running stuff that says Amir Coffey has to make the winning pass for us to score. They're running stuff that emphasizes ball movement and just getting the ball to the open shooter. And what's important about that in the case of Minnesota is it's not diminishing Amir Coffey's ability to score. They don't have the luxury of taking him and making him a distributor first. They need him to score, and he is scoring. He's not scoring at a high level, but he's scoring at a significant level. So they were able to win big games with that. The other player who I would say was really had an important Thanksgiving week was Josh Langford at Michigan State. A guy who in the first half of the Kansas game was about as involved in the offense as I was sitting on the mezzanine at Bankers Life Fieldhouse. And I didn't get a chance after the game, but I am absolutely certain that he got reamed for not being aggressive offensively because every game he's played since, he has had the offense on full blast. And there have been a couple of games where he didn't shoot a bunch because of the nature of the opposition. But in Vegas, for the most part, when he needed to be aggressive, he really was. He had 29 points in the championship game against Texas, and they needed them because they started so poorly. And that's the guy that he needs to be all the time. This is a really talented guy. This is a guy who was a top 20 player in a class that produced 16 one-and-dones, maybe the deepest class in the one-and-done era. And he was right in that mix in terms of the ratings if you go back. But he's really struggled to find his footing, not in terms of his ability, but in terms of his belief in it's okay for me to shoot the basketball. I get in arguments with different people, and Tom Izzo in particular drives me crazy with this because he says to his guys sometimes, you need to be more selfish. I hate that word because selfish is always bad, but aggressive is usually good. And if your job is to score points for your team, whether you're Romeo Langford or Jawan, as we said before, or in this case, Josh Langford, if your job is to score points, it is not selfish to take open shots. It's selfish to not take open shots. So he doesn't need to be more selfish. He needs to be aggressive in the way that he was in that Texas game.
I agree with the semantic argument that you're making there. I like that because you're right. Selfish is bad, but aggressive is fine, and you have to be. And some guys, especially given we had this conversation actually on the postgame show. Let me get your thoughts on it about Juwan Morgan, kind of in this realm where he likes to come out at the start of games and kind of feel his way through it, and he's not very assertive. And Indiana struggled a little bit to get off to good starts. Coach and I, we both thought he needs to be a little bit more aggressive at the start of games. Maybe if Indiana had kind of, better offensive guys, or if Romeo Langford was more aggressive right off the bat, then Juwan could kind of ease into it. He doesn't have that luxury with some of the other guys. So kind of the same thing. Don't be selfish. You're not out there to get yours at the expense of others. But sometimes the context means, look, we lean on you for offense. We need to follow your lead. So you got to be aggressive to lead. Would you say it applies there too?
Oh, absolutely. And I think in particular in his position, because if you come out aggressive as a player who is a power forward skill wise, but most of the time is playing as a 5-man, and so you're often being guarded by centers that have to contend with your suddenness, your ability to burst quickly. And early in games, you maybe aren't quite ready to play, and you reach. I mean, Juwan ran into that in Arkansas. When he got into foul trouble. If you come out and you play aggressively from the jump as the player in his position, you might get a couple of cheap ones against the other team's big guy and force him to the bench in the way that you were forced at Arkansas. And that was a case where Arkansas's big guys, Daniel Gafford, he really came after him. And honestly, to me, that was a revelation, Gafford's offensive ability in that game. A year ago, he was not that guy. And I don't think Juwan was ready for it. And he fouled a couple times, and he ended up not being able to play much in the first half, and it had a big effect on that game.
Yeah, it did. All right, Big Ten ACC Challenge coming up. We talked a little bit about IU Duke. What are the other matchups that you will be watching the closest?
Well, I think that from the Big Ten standpoint, there are games that they have to have. I think that with Michigan playing the way they are and being at home, and they get a prime opportunity against a Carolina team that's very talented and very capable, but you're at home, your crowd should be pretty jacked. I think that's an opportunity that the Big Ten needs to take advantage of. So that would be one. Michigan State, Louisville has played pretty well for a team that's in its first year under a new coach and that lost a lot of key players and is basically developing, not freshmen for the most part, but sophomores who are either marginal contributors or secondary contributors a year ago. They're playing pretty well, but this is one of the Big Ten's best teams going in there. So that would be kind of the kind of game that they need to have as a conference. Then there are the games that would be good to get. Minnesota at Boston College, if they could keep their role going and make sure that they don't lose to a team for which there aren't great expectations. If Boston College had kept a couple of their guys that went pro, BC might be a team that is among the favored teams in the ACC, but they're not. Ohio State against Syracuse at home for the Buckeyes. Ohio State playing very well. Syracuse is a much better team than they showed in New York in the games they lost. But with that being the case, you're at home. You kind of need that. And then I don't think you have to have Maryland against Virginia, but that would be an enormous feather for the Big Ten. It's Maryland playing at home, very young. It's going to be a lot different for them in that game than probably any game they play this season. Yeah. But if they could find a way to tilt it in their direction, again, that would be another big one for the Big Ten. What's your
gut feeling about which conference comes out on top?
Oh, my gut feeling is that the matchups favor the ACC, as they did a year ago. They favored the ACC a year ago, and I remember saying, the ACC didn't need the help because the ACC was a better and deeper league than the Big Ten a year ago. It's not this year. It probably is stronger at the top with Duke and Virginia and Carolina matched up against, whichever three you think are the best for, let's say Michigan State, and then whoever the third best is. I think that the ACC has an advantage there. But I think if you look at the matchups and you break it down, they favor the ACC. So if the Big Ten could just, if they could get somewhere near 500, I think that they'd be if they could get to 6-8, I think that would really help the league with everything they've accomplished to date. With what they still have out there, I think that would be a significant performance. If they were able to overperform that, I think anything 500 or better is stellar.
All right. Follow him on Twitter at TSN Mike DeCourcy. Thank you, as always, for joining us on Banner Monday.
Thank you.
All righty. Well, coming up, it is time for our deep dive into IU Duke. Ryan saw them play in Maui. He has a lot of thoughts on their personnel, what Indiana will need to do to compete in this game. So he will be rejoining us. Stick with us here on the Assembly Call. Welcome back to Banner Monday. Each week here in our final segment, we dedicate it to previewing Indiana's upcoming opponent for that week. And, of course, we jumped ahead to this as our final segment because Ben Ladner, not with us this week. He'll be back next week with another edition of Basketball 201. But we'll spend a little bit more time this week talking about Indiana's upcoming opponent, which is Duke. And back with us is Ryan Phillips, who saw Duke play out in Maui. You know, I guess... let's start off with kind of a macro question about this game, Ryan, because, look, the expectation is that Duke's going to win. Obviously, kind of the veneer of invincibility is gone because we've seen them lose. Now, it should be noted that Gonzaga might be the best team in the country. And, you know,
just Kansas for number one.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's not like just anybody beat them. You know, they played a good game. Gonzaga just happened to play better. They beat them, but I think it is nice to at least have seen them lose. And, you know, Indiana comes in a little bit walking wounded. We're all a little bit concerned about what we've seen over the last 3 games. So are you expecting this to just be a Duke blowout, kind of like when we went up there in 2016 and we're totally non-competitive? Or do you think this is a game where, look, the deck is stacked against Indiana. They're probably going to lose, but they're going to go up there and play well, and they can compete on the same court with Duke? Or are they just at 2 different levels?
They have to play hard to have a chance, and they have to hit threes. They have to, you know, because Duke's got way more size than Indiana does. I mean, you look at RJ Barrett, who's likely to be the number 1 pick in the draft, is 6'7", and he plays like a guard. I mean, you can tell he's modeled his game after someone like James Harden. Then you got Cam Reddish, who's the other guard, who's 6'8", and then you got Zion, who's 6'7", 285. I mean, they just and then you know, guy nobody talks about, Marcus Bolden, 6'11" center. I mean, they have size, they have length. Even their bench guys, like Javin DeLaurier is 6'10". Alex O'Connell, who's a wing, is 6'6". I mean, they're huge. They're huge guys. And the guy who's forgotten is Trey Jones, who's a 6'2" point guard who played really well out in Maui. I mean, he was like the 13th recruit in the country. And it's like, 13th. I mean, they got 3 of the top 4 or the top 3 or whatever. And Trey Jones gets forgotten, and he was fantastic out in Maui. So they just come at you in waves. And even when they struggle, and they struggled at times against Auburn when they wound up beating Auburn, but they just always kind of turn it on when they need to. It reminds me of how, like, you know, the Warriors will struggle with the team for a while, and I'm not comparing Duke to the Warriors, but just bear with me. But, you know, they struggle at times with teams, and then when they need to turn on, they turn it on, and they blow them out. And that happened against Gonzaga. They were down about 15 against Gonzaga at one point, and within the blink of an eye, it was a 1-possession game. And so they really can turn it on, and these guys are really, really good. And I'm loath to, like, praise a Duke team, but they're really good and they're tough to beat. And a guy who also is another guy who is really important for them is Jack White. He's an Australian 6'7" shooter off the wing. So they just have these guys who come in waves, and it's really tough to beat. And I think guys like Jack White and O'Connell and DeLaurier and Bolden will be just as important as those freshmen to what Duke does this year, because if those freshmen have an off game, those guys need to step up, and they all do things that can help you win.
So were you listening to Mike DeCourcy talk about the keys to beating Duke for Indiana?
I didn't hear the whole thing, but I heard some of it. What did he
So, you know, his main thing was about basically containing RJ Barrett and just not letting RJ Barrett go nuts driving into the lane. And, you know, what I found interesting about that, I mean, look, all these guys are tough, and it's kind of pick your poison, because it's like, well, yeah, let's take away RJ Barrett. Great. Now you've got Zion Williamson and Cam Reddish and Trey Jones and all these other guys. So we get that. I thought that was interesting because to me, you watch the end of that Gonzaga game, and sometimes RJ Barrett just gets tunnel vision with his driving. He didn't kick it out to Cam Reddish, and as we've heard, he's missed more. Or I think Zion Williamson has taken one more shot than Cam Reddish has missed, or something like that, or that Barrett has missed. So he's taking a lot of shots and not being particularly efficient.
He's playing like a freshman at times. He really is, but he's the most talented freshman in the country.
Yeah.
He's just playing like a guy who got whatever he wanted in high school, had it really easy, and is playing that way. And so you're right. But the way to beat that is to keep them. I did hear, I was talking to SDSU, San Diego State's coach, Brian Dutcher, and San Diego State played Duke in the first round. And I asked him, well, how do you stop a guy like Zion Williamson, who just, at that point he had, I forget what it was, but it's like he had only missed like 4 shots or 5 shots all season. Or, it was some weird statistic that he barely missed any shots from inside the 3-point line. And I asked him, well, how do you stop him? Like, how do you take? He's like, well, you got to make him a jump shooter. I was like, well, yeah, good luck. I mean, that guy can get anywhere he wants on the floor because he's 285 pounds and he's strong. It's not a bad 285 pounds, which is really hard to describe to people until you see him in person. He's like a block of granite. Like he's not perfectly, sculpted or whatever, but it's all strength. And the guy is basically a left tackle who has a 48-inch vertical and dancer's feet. It's impossible to it doesn't make sense in your brain when you're breaking down like what he can do until you've seen it up close and watched it repeatedly. It really is. There's a reason why there's so much hype around Zion, and it's because it really is incredible to watch what he can do. There were 2 dunks he almost threw down in Maui that he got fouled on both of them, but he was going to throw. It wasn't like one of those where he was going to slam it off the rim. Like these were both going down, and I think the tournament would have just ended right there. Like it was just, everybody in the crowd was buzzing about missed dunks for like 5 minutes afterwards. You don't see that at high level college basketball very often. We saw it with Victor Oladipo a couple times at Indiana. Imagine that, like those level dunks coming from a guy who's built like a left tackle. I mean, it doesn't make sense. And so he's just so hard to plan for. But then, as you said, you've got Barrett, who is amazing at getting to the rim. Whether he makes or misses, he's amazing at slithering his way into the rim and getting the ball up there. He had a dunk against Gonzaga that was just unbelievable, left-handed dunk. I mean, he's left-handed, but he went up and just dunked over half the team. And that was a game where he didn't play particularly well for most of it, but still, late in the game when they needed him, he helped bring them back. Reddish is probably the best shooter of the 3 guys. He's a little he's smoother, I think, than the other 2, but he's a little less his ceiling isn't as high. I still think the thing is today, if you ask me who the top 4 picks in the NBA draft are going to be, I got RJ Barrett number 1, probably Nasir Little from North Carolina at number 2. Then I think Reddish is going to go number 3, and I think Zion will go after that, maybe 4 or 5. Just the only reason Zion will fall down is because of the fit in the NBA. It's kind of hard to figure out what to do with him in the NBA. And I asked Billis about that when I was interviewing him, and I said, so what is Zion Williamson in the NBA? And he said he's whatever he wants to be is the answer. He can do whatever he wants. And again, overwhelming talent. And this isn't a problem that IU is going to face against Duke. It's a problem everybody's going to face against Duke. So how to game plan them. And the fact that IU's getting them in November instead of like February, where maybe some teams have taken a run at them with different styles to try and defend them and stuff. And you can kind of look at the film and decide what, how you want to attack them. I mean, everybody's still trying to figure it out. And it's not like Gonzaga did something, monumental or shocking against them. They just guarded them straight up and had enough depth and size to hang with them. And Duke missed shots. Gonzaga didn't. And also Gonzaga had veteran guards, and that was huge.
So, look, if Indiana is going to make this a 40-minute game, everybody who plays is going to have to play well. We know that.
Yes.
Rob Finney is going to essentially have to play Trey Jones to a draw. It'll, be interesting to see if he's up to that. we talked about Juwan Morgan. There are two guys in particular who I think are going to be absolutely huge, and I want to get your thoughts on them. One is clearly Romeo Langford. Like, he has to play like a star for Indiana to have a chance. I think we'll see more intensity from Romeo than we've seen the last few games.
Yeah.
But I think, the temptation will also be there to really be looking for his offense, really be aggressive. And I think he'll need to be. So he's going to have to be an efficient scorer and make his outside shots. The other guy is Justin Smith, who has been just crazy inconsistent this year. And really, for the most part, it's bad inconsistent. We haven't really seen great Justin Smith yet. It was nice to see him hit that 3 at the end of the UC Davis game, but he was all over the place that game too. And I feel like in a game like this where there's athletes all over the floor, your athletes are going to have to play really well. And Justin Smith is clearly, he's the second best athlete on the team after Romeo. So I think those two guys are absolutely huge. How do you see them fitting into this game?
Well, I think you're going to have Justin Smith on Cam Reddish probably. And I think that you're probably going to get the dream matchup of Romeo and RJ Barrett. I think you have to do that. And it's tough. And you might switch those two. I mean, because they're both so big, Barrett and Reddish. If you put Romeo on Reddish, you probably keep him out of foul trouble. But you also risk Justin Smith not sticking with RJ Barrett. But I think that Justin Smith has to guard one of those two guys because of their size. And
what about McRoberts? If he's healthy enough to play,
I'm not sure McRoberts is going to be back. So
even if he is, he probably can't play more than 15 minutes, 20 minutes.
Yeah.
You would think.
So I mean, I'm just going with the matchups we've got, and then look, other than Deron Davis, I'm not sure anybody can guard Marcus Bolden down there. And Bolden isn't a great offensive player, but you have to account for him. That's the thing, is because they'll just throw lobs to him all game. I mean, so you have to have somebody in there. Maybe you get Clifton Moore off the bench with his length to do something. I mean, you've got to use what you've got, and Clifton Moore is certainly somebody who can be deployed effectively there. We'll see.
But he can be deployed. We've yet to see if he can be deployed effectively there.
Deployed in that way, I guess. But yeah, I mean, that's the biggest issue for me. Isn't going to be athleticism. It isn't going to be playing at Cameron. It's not going to be the crowd, the officiating, Coach K, whatever. The biggest thing for me is going to be the size. And Duke is shockingly big. They really are. They walk into the arena and you're just like, okay. I mean, I was there watching top college basketball teams all week. Arizona was there. They've got a ton of talent. They're not as good as last year, but they've got a ton of talent. Auburn was there. They're a top 10 team. You've got Gonzaga there. You've got whoever. When Duke walked in the arena, it looked like something else. It looked like the other teams were AAA and this was the major leagues. It just, they look different. They're bigger. They're stronger. They're, the length, everything is there. And so that's what, for me, for Indiana, that's what I struggle with seeing them beating, is that size. I mean, when Romeo drives into the lane, he's going to be surrounded by bigger guys than he's ever been surrounded by. And when Juwan Morgan posts up, the help's going to come, and it's going to be from guys who are bigger than he's ever had help from, and they're athletic enough to recover to their guys. So that's where I struggle seeing Indiana have success, is just against that size and length. We'll obviously see. The key, you have to get off to a fast start. If you get down 15 to Duke, you're buried, because if they run, I mean, you have to bog them down in half-court offense, because they're new. Just like every other team in the country, they're new at running whatever they're running. I mean, it's still November for them too. So you have to bog them down in half-court offense. You have to get back defensively, and then you just have to muck things up in their half-court. That's the only way to stop them, is just to get back on defense and slow it down. Take your opportunities in transition when you can get them, but you don't want to get into an up and down game with them. And you've got to run your stuff on offense perfectly, hope for some fouls, hope to get to the line, and then you got to make your free throws with this team, which this team hasn't done. So there's just so much stacked against Indiana in this one. I think it's a game where they're going to lose. I think they're going to play okay. But it's just such a tough task to ask this team, who's got some injuries, who's really struggled the last couple games, missing guys, And to ask them to go down into maybe the toughest environment in college basketball and come away with a win is asking way too much of them, particularly given how young this team is and how young these guys are, that we're going to be relying a lot on. So it's one of those things where I think it's going to be a loss, and I don't think fans should overreact to it. I think you should start reacting to how this team is playing at the end of December. And so they're still trying to figure it out. But yeah, this is going to be a rough one. I think this is going to be a tough one.
So let me ask you a philosophical question, because this is easy for us to say from 1,000 miles away looking at it. But, the team, the coaches, they are in the trenches about to play a game that they have to go up there and believe they can win. Like Archie said, we're going up there to win the game. He didn't say
it's
that
us
exactly.
Against the world. That's what the mentality has to be.
Okay, but let me ask you this, knowing that. So do you pull out all the stops to win this game? Meaning this, right? Indiana wants to play fast. Their current average possession length is 15.5 seconds, which is the 38th fastest in the country. They want to play fast. Would you slow that down, even though it's what you don't normally do? Defensively, would you consider playing zone, even though you really want to be a pack line man-to-man team and that's what you want to play? Would you do some things that are out of character going all out to win this game, or would you prefer to see Indiana, or would you, if you were Archie Miller, say, you know what, we're going to do what we do, and we're going to go up there and try and win that way because you think it'll help develop the team for the future, working on your stuff in this kind of environment against this kind of team?
I almost see this as a game that's like apart from the schedule. Like it's just kind of a one-off. So yeah, if you want to go out and win it and do whatever and shock them and surprise them with different looks, do it. I don't care, because this is a different type of thing that you're going to face all year because of that level of talent, because of that size. You may have to go zone to protect your players from getting into foul trouble. You may have to, play ridiculously fast and then slow it down again to get a win here. And you're going to have to play different to get a win. So I do think that when you look at what Indiana does normally, it doesn't match up well with what Duke does, because Duke wants you to play that way. Duke wants you to isolate guys one-on-one with their talent. Duke wants you to play fast because then they can play fast. So, and the whole thing with Duke is, as we know, they get out in transition, they get to the bucket, then you're starting to pay attention, guys getting to the rim, pay attention, guys getting to the rim, and they kick it out for those threes and knock down threes. Guys, again, like Jack White, Alex O'Connell. I mean, those guys can all hit it from the outside, and they're the guys you forget about because you're so focused on the other guys. So it's like I said, it's a Rubik's Cube, and it's tough to figure out. It's not something that comes naturally, and it's not like there's an easy answer. Make them a half-court team. Okay, yeah, good luck with that. Make Zion Williamson a jump shooter. Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, do that. I mean, it's just things that are so difficult. And I think it's right now where this team's at, how young it is, and how it's struggling with injuries and how it's struggled the last couple games. I just don't see the recipe for beating them. I hope I'm completely wrong, and I hope I get shocked tomorrow. Maybe Duke's complacent, but I just don't feel like there's really that possibility. I totally hope I'm wrong, and I will be rooting super hard for the Hoosiers, but it's just hard for me to see the way that this team, this current makeup figures it out.
This has been a very depressing segment.
Yeah, it is. Trust me, I was sitting there watching Duke in Maui trying to be like, okay, well, maybe if they do this, oh, nope, that's not going to work. Maybe if they do that, no, not going to work. I mean, they're tough, man. They're a puzzle to solve, and somebody's going to solve it this year. I don't know if
Gonzaga already solved it. I mean,
they did, but you've also got to factor in the fact that Duke didn't shoot it well. Duke didn't do this, and Gonzaga, everything went right for Gonzaga in that game, and they still only won by 2 and had a chance to lose it at the end. I mean, it's that Gonzaga basically played a mostly perfect game and almost lost. And Gonzaga is also missing their big man, as I mentioned, Killian Tilly. So maybe down the road, if they played them, it would be a different story. They'd have much more dominance in that game. But my goodness, they played a perfect game, and Duke still almost beat them.
All right, so last question for you then. Obviously, if Indiana goes out, loses to Duke, as we've said, that's not going to be cause for concern or the sky's falling. What would make you come on the post-game show and be really concerned?
It's less about the score. It's more about guys looking like they've given up or dejected. I want to see guys play hard, and I want to see guys it doesn't. If you're down 25, I want to see guys cutting. I want to see them attacking and working on stuff. At that point, if you're down 20 at Cameron, work on your half court offense. Work on solidifying the pack line. Work on getting the ball in the post, kicking it out, looking for open guys. Moving the ball. That's what I want to see. If you get down 25 and guys are just gunning and running and trying to get their own shots and firing up quick threes and stuff like that. I don't want to see that. I want to see guys, if you get down, run your stuff and hopefully that, you can chip away at a lead and maybe make it look a little more respectable.
Yeah, basically just don't look like the 2016 game.
Basically, yeah. Where you've just given up by halftime. And I want to see guys look like they're involved and engaged regardless of the score.
This is not going to surprise longtime listeners, but I am not as pessimistic about this game as you are. I'm not picking Indiana to win. We only have one person on the show crazy enough to do that.
We're beating Duke.
It's Coach. Although in his fairness to him, he said that before he saw Duke play, and I think he is quickly backpedaled on that statement. I don't think the result is a foregone conclusion. I think the thing is yes, Duke is favored. Yes, Duke is probably going to win. Yeah, we're going to have to play really, really well to make this a 40-minute game. But I think, it's important to remember, Duke has dudes, but we have some dudes too. We've got 2 of the 5 best players on the floor. I guess maybe 2 of the 6 best players on the floor, depending on where you think Trey Jones is. And I think those guys are going to be able to do some things. And if we can get some contributions from, some of the other guys and just come out like you said, I think the key is, we are just going to have to play unusually hard. Just really come out, take the punches that they're going to give us. And if we do that, then maybe we can make this a 40-minute game. You seem more resigned to it potentially being a blowout. I'm not quite at that point yet. But either way, it's going to be a really difficult game, and we need to stop the show soon because I'm going to open my mouth and words just are going to stop coming out.
Rest up,
I can feel it going right now.
Rest up.
Yeah, I will rest up. I'm not even going to do the closing comments because I'm not going to make you suffer through me doing all those. So we will talk to you guys after the game.
Hopefully.
Well, I'll at least be there. You'll at least be able to see my face. Okay, we got to shut this thing down.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
All right, we'll talk to you all Tuesday night after IU Duke.
All right, later, everybody.
Thank you for being here and for listening to this episode of the Assembly Call. We appreciate it. And we really do rely on the support of audience members like you to keep our show going and to keep growing. And so we have set up a page on our website at assemblycall.com/support that lists 5 ways that you can support the Assembly Call. And we encourage you to choose whichever method is the easiest and most convenient for you. One of the methods is donating, and so many of you have donated, and we appreciate it so much. On that page, you can choose a monthly recurring donation or an annual recurring donation or just a one-time donation, whatever works for you. And if you don't want to donate, another way to support the show is you can use our affiliate URLs, iutickets.shop or iustore.shop when you're going to shop for tickets or gear, and we will get paid a small commission when you use those links. But however you support the show, we appreciate it. Thank you.